Well, greetings and welcome to another 1615 webinar. I'm Matthew Ellison, President at 1615, where I also serve as a church missions coach. You already heard David, if you were on earlier. He's going to join us at the end for Q&A with Tory as well. Now, before we begin today's webinar, let me let you know about some upcoming events, as well as some resources that will likely be of interest to you. A few years ago, I co-authored a book with my good friend Denny Spitters called When Everything is Missions. And in this book, we address this prevailing philosophy that everyone's a missionary and every good, altruistic, evangelistic work done in Jesus' name is a missions work. We ask, are those biblical ideas? Are they helpful ideas? Did they lead to more missions work being accomplished or less? We also have a companion book called Conversations on When Everything is Missions. And this book brings together 15 different contributors and introduces their voices to the conversation. David Platt, J.D. Payne, Ed Stetzer, and many others. You can pick those up at wheneverythingismissions.com. We also have a podcast entitled When Everything is Missions. You could subscribe to that wherever you get your podcasts, and we bring together some of the authors. This season, we have the authors from the companion book. And previous seasons, we have leading missions thinkers and practitioners, and we address all things missions. So again, if you're a podcast person, please subscribe to our podcast, and I think you'll be blessed. The Mission Table is an ongoing interactive web conversation that we started several years ago. We have 3 seasons available to watch. We gather, once again, leading missions thinkers and practitioners, and we tackle some of the most critical, controversial topics impacting missions today. So if you're a part of a missions team or even a mission agency, you're going to want to tune in to missiontable.org and listen to some of those provocative, thought-provoking conversations. I want to let you know today's webinar is being recorded. We record all of our webinars, and we've been doing so since 2011. So if you want to dive into our library and find an array of topics on missions, we hope you'll take advantage of those free resources. You can get them at 1615.org/webinars, or just click on the resources panel on the homepage. We also have another podcast that we do in partnership with Missio Nexus called The Mission Matters. We launched during COVID and it's been very popular. We've gotten some great feedback from it. Again, wherever you get your podcast, you can probably find it. It's available on 10 podcast platforms. And we talk about the matters of our mission, and we also focus on this idea that our mission matters. So you can watch that on YouTube as well. We also have a resource called the Mobilized Church. It is a workshop designed for church missions leaders. We launched it a few years ago. We have converted it into a virtual experience, and once again, we're so excited to be doing it live. In this workshop, we address 7 keys that were present in the church at Antioch of Syria. This was the first church we read about in the New Testament that had global vision and strategy. And we help you think about how do you develop a vibrant missions culture in your context as you look at those keys that unlock the missions potential in Antioch. Again, excited about a 2-day workshop, which will be live in Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas, November 9 and 10. You can learn more about the Mobilized Church workshop at 1615.org/TMC. We do another partnership with Missio Nexus called Peer-to-Peer. This is designed for church and missions leaders specifically. And on August 4th, we're bringing together Denny Spitters of Pioneers and Josiah Bellflower, who's the missions pastor at Desert Springs Church. This church and agency have partnered together to launch a team into North Africa. The team has been out there for about 6 years, and they're going to talk about what they've learned about meaningful, effective ministry. What are the things the agency needs to bring to the table? What are the things the church needs to bring to the table? So if you're interested in learning more about ingredients for fruitful partnership between mission, agency, and church, you're going to want to join us. And then on October 6th, we have a P2P with Rebecca of Cafe 1040. And also, let's see, Barna is going to be on this one as well. We're going to talk about Gen Z and global missions. How do we mobilize the next generation of missionaries? Again, you can register at 1615.org. And then some upcoming webinars, something similar to the one I just mentioned with P2P. We'll be talking about mobilizing the next generation. September 9th, we'll have our 4th installment in mobilizing people of color. This time, we're going to be focusing on mobilizing Asian American churches. And then, boy, I'm excited about this one. We have Live Dead, the danger of safety. Live Dead's an organization that we partner with. And boy, this is an important topic, how our love affair with safety keeps us from missions and what to do about it. Once again, register at 1615.org. Well, in just a moment, I'm going to turn the handle over here to Tory Ruark. Today's webinar is entitled Rebooting Short-Term Missions, and it's definitely a timely one. We know that short-term missions were on pause in a major way during COVID, and the doors seem to be opening up, and now is a great time to reboot and think about what we want short-term missions to look like going into the future. Tory is today's subject matter expert. He is the Chief Operations Officer at standardsofexcellence.org. Now, in just a moment, I'm going to hand the controls over to Tory, but first, a few details. Your phones are muted to preserve sound quality. So you can listen through your computer speakers or call in on your telephone. Now, as questions come to mind today, and we hope they do, please type them in the question and answer panel located on the right-hand side of your screen, because we're going to take the last 15 or 20 minutes of our time together, and we're going to hand those questions, as it were, over to Tory. This is your opportunity to enter into the conversation. So don't wait till the end, populate that panel as they come to mind, and then we'll address them at the finish. So we have 109 people registered for today's webinar. As I mentioned, you'll be able to view or listen to this webinar at 1615.org. So Tory, I'm going to hand it over to you now. I want to thank you so much for giving us your time today. It's all yours, brother.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, and I'm excited to work with 1615. We were just saying before that many people, I think, look at short-term missions as the catalyst for a larger mission ministry at their church. And that's a recipe for failure, actually. I think, the missions ministry has to be the catalyst for short-term missions. And that's what I love about 1615. So really happy to be here. And I'm excited to share. So we are going to jump in this idea of rebooting short-term missions. And I'll be able to advance the slides in just a moment here. I believe the controls are coming over. Just because we're rebooting short-term missions, it doesn't mean that that we have to reboot all of missions. So on some level, I want to bring you back to the basics. We're not rebooting all of missions. I want to remind you that the world is really big. Maybe you don't need that reminder, but the mission never stopped. Keep in mind that just like you would probably have tons of stories at your church and around your community of the amazing ways that God moved through you and in your communities, despite all the restrictions of COVID. Your hosts, your overseas partners probably have those same stories or similar ones. So the mission never stopped, but we do have this natural time to reboot short-term missions. And so I want to encourage you, part of that rebooting process, if you're not already thinking of this, is one of the things I want you to come away with is, as you evaluate your short-term mission trip or your program, we tend to evaluate based on an end product. That's how things work. That's how we get grades in school. That's how we determine the success. The winner of the game is the one who scored the most. That's tough in God's kingdom. A results-based way of evaluating is really tough in God's kingdom. So I want you to think about it. We might not at the end of our trip be able to decide whether this was a good trip or not based on the outcome. So let's look at the process. And that's where I'd love to introduce you to the 7 standards of excellence. And you can visit soe.org and learn about those. You can download a nice little catalog about them. But the 7 standards, and I'm just going to say them really fast because we're not going to investigate those, but it's God-centeredness, empowering partnerships, mutual design, comprehensive administration, qualified leadership, appropriate training, and thorough follow-through. So look, if you can't judge whether it was a good trip based on did the kids all come home safe, based on how many people gave their life to Jesus, if you can't judge it on all those things, then we got to look at the process. And what we're saying is, if you go through the process, with all those 7 things, if you have those 7 standards are involved in your process, then I think you can feel really confident that you're honoring God, you're honoring hosts, you're honoring those that you're ministering to, which I think would be our desire. That maybe would be the definition of a good trip, that you honored God, you honored your host, and you honored those you served. But I also want to remind you that while we're rebooting short-term missions, we have to have realistic expectations. I'm sure you are aware of this, but while it might seem that COVID is coming to an end in our state, in our country, restrictions are lifting and there's fewer cases, it's not that way all around the world. So have some realistic expectations about what your host and your partner might be able to handle as far as visiting. So as you're rebooting, be really sensitive to that and work with them. We've got some great resources on our website for free. If you scroll all the way to the bottom right, you can click on kind of our COVID page, and we've got some great resources there too. So where are we now? And I want to address these 3 things that I think are really relevant and timely. One is virtual technology, which, you know, I'm sure you're dealing with, this idea of returning to travel. And then I want to have just some general cautions as we return to travel. So let's jump into that virtual missions. This idea of virtual missions, one of the things that we've heard from our members is, as they've attempted these virtual mission experiences, is they sometimes even get feedback from their participants that sometimes there's some incongruence between what we're providing as a virtual mission trip and what people are expecting. And what it sounds like it hinges on is, and it probably, maybe it's semantics or expectations, but what a lot of people are putting out there as virtual missions, I think, are better described as experiences. In other words, what it's doing is it's allowing you to maybe hear voices of global church members, of your partners, to hear stories, to get to know maybe even a little bit about that culture. And then it sets you up to become an advocate, to give money, to maybe host a fundraiser, to perhaps to pray, or to perhaps engage later on down the line. It's really an experience. And some of our members have said, people signed up and said, I thought I was going to get to do something for the mission, which of course there's always that balance, right? Especially in short-term missions, of accomplishing compared to just living in relationship. So there are some virtual experiences that are actually helping that host accomplish the long-term goals of their ministry. So I want you to think through, as you're thinking about, we're thinking about doing virtual mission trips, or we've been doing them. Is it a mission? And again, man, you know, how do we define what is, you know, everything is missions. How do we define that? In this case, the delineation I want to make is, if your participation is helping that host accomplish their long-term goals, then that's probably what people are thinking of in terms of a mission trip. If what you're doing with your experience is simply exposing them and allowing them to hear the voices and perhaps give, which of course is helping them reach their goals, but perhaps give or become an advocate, that's probably more on the experience end. It's not, one is not right and one is wrong, but understand they're different experiences, and the way that you promote them is going to set an expectation. So just be aware of that and make sure you're promoting them in the way that they really are. So let's talk for a second about what makes each one successful. If you're doing one of those that you say, man, you know, we really want to get people, we really want to come alongside of our host and help them accomplish their goals. Yeah, there's a lot of, you're gonna have to be creative. Let me just tell you that. But typically where we've seen people be able to do that, what they've done is what we're kind of used to with short-term mission trips, is these large teams that go for days on end, and it's very time intensive, labor intensive, and very general. What we've found is, to be effective in meeting those long-term goals, what usually happens is it's very small groups for a specific amount of time, usually short just an hour a day or an hour and a half, a couple times a week, with a very targeted purpose. So a lot of our members have continued with English lessons. Some of them have continued with discipleship opportunities for those in their host network who wouldn't otherwise have access to them. We've had other people share about if a big part of their goals are relationship oriented and building friendships to the point where they can invite them into their spiritual community. Let's say I know that my friend is a coffee connoisseur, and I know that one of my host churches, there's 2 or 3 people there who are that way too. And I host a Zoom meeting and say, I want you, my friend, I want you to meet my other friends back in the United States because you guys have so much in common. And we're going to come together and talk about how do you prepare the perfect cup of coffee, or what's your favorite one, whatever that might be. So most likely you're gonna have to be really creative, but most likely it's not going to be these generic, general, large groups. It's going to be very small. It's going to be very specific, short amount of time, and it's going to be very targeted, both in terms of what you're doing and in the people you're involving. Now, on the experience side, what are some of the things that we've learned? Well, some of the things we've learned that make these global experiences successful are you want to give voice to your global partners, but you're going to have to navigate technology, whether that's live or pre-recorded. Make sure that you're giving voice to those global church members who, without technology, you maybe wouldn't be able to hear. Involve some kind of shared experience. It might be something that you're actually doing at the same time, or at the same time. It could be a fast. It could be a walkathon. It could be a variety of things. It could be that actually you take something out of their culture and ask the team to experience it for a set amount of time. It could be what the food they eat. It could be the temperature they place their room, their house at. It could be the way they dress, a variety of things. Something to have it become experiential. Then you want to actually make sure, if you can, involve the standards as you go through it. So think about, I rushed through those 7 standards, but some of those things are partnerships. So how do I work with my partner to put on display their goals and for those people who are experiencing it? How do I make sure they're trained for some, even though it's virtual, there's still some cross-cultural interaction. How do I make sure that they're trained and prepared for that? What do they need to know about the culture going into it? Or what might they learn about the culture beforehand that will enhance their experience? And then on the backside, that's the 7th standard is thorough follow through. What can you do after this experience that will help them to continue to engage? So what opportunities are there for deeper engagement besides just that connection online for that short amount of time? So those are hopefully some keys as you think about virtual technology, as you're rebooting. And of course, the question then is, as we are rebooting, and God willing, we're able to travel, will there be a place for virtual technology in the future? That's something that we're asking our members. And this is kind of what we're hearing, is that there will absolutely be a place for virtual technology. It's not going to replace in-person ministry, and it shouldn't. But there is a place for it. So what is that place? You might consider technology as some good first steps in getting to know a partner and exploring that partnership. These can be low-cost ways of exploring that partnership in a very relationship appropriate way. You might consider virtual mission experiences as a first step. Sometimes what we end up doing is we take people who maybe don't really have a sense of calling, or they don't have the commitment level that really we'd like to see, and we just throw them in. We just take them on a trip, and maybe they flounder. So you might consider a virtual mission as a nice first step for people in their engagement. And then the virtual mission is also an opportunity to draw people in who otherwise wouldn't be able to travel. Again, it could be some of those very small, specific, targeted ways. Maybe it's a way to use their skill or a hobby or interest. But it could be that because they're parents of small children, it could be because of health restrictions, it could be because they're the only caretaker for an elderly parent that they can't travel. So there will be a place for this as a way of drawing people in who otherwise wouldn't be able to participate. But we're going to have to be creative. And definitely ask your questions, and we'll maybe have a chance to answer some of those at the end. But we'll want to transition now to returning to travel, because a lot of people are asking, oh, virtual training and preparation. I missed that. Yeah, so a lot of people are saying, hey, we've started, you saw at 1615, they moved one of their workshops into an online format. We've done some of the same. And it's worked really well for us. And I'm sure some of you are experiencing that, or maybe you're saying, look, our dynamic, we have people from all over the place and we try to bring them together, but that's really hard. What can we do in the way of virtual training and preparation to prepare people for their short-term mission trip? So again, some bullet points, some things that we've learned as we've attempted to do this. So the first thing I would say is it's really easy to think we'll produce some videos that people will just watch on their own time. That's the most convenient. We'll be sure that everybody can get it that way. Our experience, though, has been it works better to bring people together online at the same time. So then maybe if you have school-age kids, you've come across the terms synchronous and asynchronous. Or I think the terms we've used is on demand or live. So if you're bringing people all together right now, we are synchronous, or we're live. I'm on here, you're on here together. If you go and watch the recording in 3 weeks, you're asynchronous, or you're watching it on demand. So there is a place for that asynchronous on demand, and I'll talk about that in a second. But don't miss out on the ability to bring people together live. And you can even have, right now we don't have a lot of interaction between us, but you can build that in, that great interaction. It's a great way to be sure people are capturing what you want them to capture. If you just put those videos out for people to watch, A, who knows if they watch them? B, who knows if they really do take away from that what you want them to take away? So don't miss the live part. Second idea is that you can use some of that on-demand and asynchronous. That's a great way to distribute content, packing lists, timelines, deadlines, even information about a culture. That's a great way to get content out to people. And then it's there, they can go back and find it whenever they need it. Try to limit the amount of time you use your live in person for content distribution. Use it instead for discussion, interaction. If they watch the video, don't show the video in your live and in person or live time. Use your live time to discuss, what did you think of the video, or what did you draw out? Use it to talk about application and context, making sure that you're checking in with people and hearing what they have to say and hearing what they took from it. And then you'll probably want to do anything virtual in smaller, shorter blocks. I think I saw what 1615 does. They took a 2-day thing and spread it out across 8 sessions. They're not doing it in 2 days online. Same thing for us. We took a 2-day thing, we spread it out across multiple days. Honestly, if you're really good, really intentional, really interactive, perhaps you can keep people live online for 3 hours with a couple of breaks in there. But probably you're looking at an hour to an hour and a half. So, but don't be afraid to sprinkle in multiple smaller blocks. And then provide opportunities for people to apply what they're learning and reflect even outside of your live time, whether that's through some kind of posting forum or journaling, or giving them an assignment to go do. And I don't necessarily mean a homework assignment, but Go and attend a religious service, a quinceañera, or go do something like that, and put into practice some of these things you've been learning. Okay, so that's just a little note about virtual technology, virtual missions training and preparation. So returning to travel, we're rebooting, and some of you are struggling through when is the right time to travel, and how do I determine that? And we've got a great kind of checklist resource on the SOE.org website. Again, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see a link to the COVID page, and we've got a nice infographic kind of checklist thing you can download. But just to give you some summaries, because again, you can get the content, but let me just summarize it for you. The heart of this is it really has to be driven by your host. So your host has to say, it's okay. We feel comfortable. We're okay hosting. But then you have some homework to do. You need to consider transmission where you're going, transmission where you're coming from. Whether people are vaccinated or not, you need to consider what kind of other mitigation things can be done with social distancing and masking and hygiene. When is it safe to return to travel? You're going to have to look at things from your risk standpoint, insurance standpoint. So when is the right time to travel? Who am I to tell you how God is leading your ministry? So this is going to be a prayerful consideration. And what we've tried to do is give you just some bullet points to checklist to think through and say, is God giving us the green light there? Check yes, 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 no, or maybe he is. So that's only part of returning to travel, is determining when is the right time to travel. Maybe you've determined it is, but now we have to consider, how do we do it responsibly? What do I need to do to travel responsibly? Let's say your host says yes, and you're looking at transmission rates, and you're looking at, can they get care and all those things. You have somebody were to test positive, is care available in country? Or if that somebody in that community were to test, or if we were to bring it to them, would they be able to get care? What do I need to do to travel responsibly? Well, again, we have a resource that hopefully will walk you through that and think through, what do I need to be prepared for ahead of time? And that resource kind of breaks down, how do I communicate with my goers? What do they need to know? What do they need to agree to? What do they need to kind of have their eyes open to, so they're walking into this understanding what they're getting themselves into? With your host, with your team leaders, and so forth. The idea here is, again, traveling responsibly. We can't avoid all risks. We can't eliminate all emergencies or all crisis. But what we can do is try to be as prepared as we can for when crisis happens, when emergencies come, when the unforeseen or unexpected happens, or even when the foreseen possibility happens. So again, some things to think about there. There's a resource you can get for more content, but just some things that rise to the top that you really don't want to miss. Again, make sure that you have adequate access to healthcare, both you and those in the community, should somebody get sick. Make sure that you have travel medical insurance that includes COVID coverage, and check and make sure that you know what all that COVID coverage includes, and find out if there's any restrictions. We've talked with some members who said their COVID coverage becomes null and void if the traveler has not been vaccinated. Some of the COVID coverage does not include, for example, let's say you're exposed to COVID but haven't tested positive, but you still have to quarantine, let's say, in that country. Some of that coverage, it won't cover that. It'll only cover if you test positive. So think through some of the ramifications. What would happen if somebody were to test positive, even as far as quarantine, who would stay with them? Would they have a place to stay financially? How is that going to affect them if they have work to come home to? So think through some of those things. Of course, all those are included in that Traveling Responsibly packet for you, and you can download it for free from the website. So returning to travel, is it time to return? And if it is, how do I travel responsibly? We want to help you prepare for that. And of course, as we're going through this, we've got resources on the website, but you can always contact us Guys, you can always put my email address in the chat box there. You can contact us through the website. We'd be happy to kind of coach you through the process too. So now some general cautions as we're thinking about returning to travel, rebooting short-term missions, some kind of general cautions. And the first one is that children are more vulnerable than ever. And you can visit faith2action.org to learn more about this concept. And I'll try not to get too far on a rabbit trail, but did you know that something like 80% or more of children who are in orphanages and children's homes around the world actually have a living family member? They don't always end up in an orphanage because they don't have parents. The number one thing that lands children in orphanages is poverty. The parents will sometimes voluntarily give their child up to an orphanage if they see that as where they get access to, where they have food security, where they have access to education. Now, I don't know about you, but I've thought about this. I've looked around and I thought, I noticed that we don't have orphanages in the United States. And I wondered why that was. Is that because we don't have kids without parents? Well, that's certainly not true. It's because mental health, child development experts learned that institutional care is not what's best for children. We shouldn't be surprised about that. That's why God set up the family. The families are the best place for children. And that's not to say that an unhealthy family and home is a good thing. But children are more vulnerable than ever because COVID has affected poverty to such a great degree. Children's advocates noticed after Ebola, after the HIV pandemic, after great crisis, there tends to be an influx of children into residential care not because their parents all died, but because poverty pushes them there. And we need to be really aware of that. We need to be aware of how can we strengthen and support families? How can we keep children in their families? Children are more vulnerable than ever. Before you just dive into residential care, to orphanage or children's homes, go to faith2action.org and learn more about that involvement. That's not to say orphanages are all bad and the people who are involved in children's homes are bad. No. We want to support children and families in the best way possible, and that is what can we do to strengthen families and keep children in their family. Okay, so just keep in mind as you return to international travel, as you return to engaging in cross-cultural ministry, children are more vulnerable than ever, and we really need to know what we're doing when we engage in that. The second caution I would have for you is don't go back to the same old thing. No matter who asks about the next trip, whether it's your host, your pastor, your elder board, members from your church who are saying, when are we going to do a trip again? Don't go back to the same old thing. Whether you've already been using this time to learn and evaluate, or you need to start doing it. I want to say this. How many of you have ever said, if the world ever stopped, I'd finally clean my garage? If the world ever stopped, I would get to my attic. If the world ever stopped, well, the world did stop with COVID. And I don't know about you, but there were a lot of things I said I would do that I didn't do. So it's not too late. There's lots of things. You can go to our website, start learning, engage with the guys at 1615 and start learning. We do workshops, even online, some of them at conferences. We do workshops about how to evaluate your program and integrate these 7 standards back into what you're doing. We've got a quick audit or a quick evaluation. You can go to the website and download, and it helps you just think through and evaluate your program. You can even become a member of SOE and get access to some of these ongoing learning opportunities and coaching and consulting. So just don't go back to the same old thing. Take some time to evaluate, take some time to learn, and make the changes that you kind of always wish you had if you had time to do it. And if you haven't done all that stuff yet, it's not too late. You can still do it. So just don't go back to the same old thing. Okay. And then my last caution is don't replace what your partner has learned to do, especially if they've learned to do it better. I'm really, and I'm not sure that we really know yet, because some places are still somewhat restricted and on lockdown. But I'm really curious for our members to find out from their partners what they were able to continue doing when we in North America weren't able to send our teams. And I think what they're going to find out is we're able to do maybe some things that we didn't think we could, that we often brought in our North American partner to provide. So, just like you have had experiences around your communities of interaction and God moving and ministering to people, so have your partners. So find out what that was, and don't replace what your partner has learned to do. So don't just go back to that same old paradigm. Be sensitive to that. It does mean you may need to get more creative, and you may need to change who you send. It may change how many people you send. It might change how often you send them or when you send them. It could be that some of the things you sent people to go do, that your partner now does for themselves, and maybe even they've learned to do it better than you were able to do it. It doesn't mean you don't have a place. It does mean we need to be creative and find how can we continue to support our partner, help them accomplish their ministry goals. How can we integrate technology perhaps? Maybe that's a way to be creative. But the idea is, how can we come and support them in the accomplishment of their long-term goals? So don't go back and just replace what your partner has learned to do. So hopefully that leaves us enough time for questions. Hopefully you have some questions. You can always get more information at the SOE.org website. And I saw that Matthew popped in, or maybe David popped in that COVID website. Thanks for doing that. But yeah, we've got some great free resources and others that you might have to pay for. We want to serve you in that way.
All right, Tory. Well, thank you, brother. Really great content. You just really did a great job. I always love to hear what you have to say and just how insightful these ideas are coming out of COVID. I really appreciate them. So we're going to dive into the questions here. Again, folks, I'm going to remind you, this is your opportunity to enter into the dialogue with Tory. Let's see. Thank you for differentiation between a mission and experience. Too many TVs are just exposure. We had a team that was helping African pastors with their doctoral theses over Zoom. That was a VT in my book. So I really appreciate that too. In fact, Tory, as that was brought up, one of the things occurred to me, many of the churches that I've worked with over the years, they were already doing these virtual experiences. They were setting aside time on Sunday morning to, maybe simulcast a service to their missionaries in field, or to have communion with their missionaries, or to bring in one of their global partners. So I really appreciate that as well. So that's more of a comment from Susan. Casey says, sorry, the voice cut out when the presenter started the reason with kids leaving relatives in orphanages. What is it?
The reasons often that children get put into children's homes or orphanages, it's usually poverty related, and it usually has to do with food security, access to education, clothing, or lack of childcare while the parent is working. Let's say it's a single mother, lack of childcare while the parent is working.
Okay, I've got a long one here. I don't think I'm going to be able to dive into all of it here, but it's also related to this idea with, caring for children, orphan care. She mentions there's some really great ones. There's some that are obviously fraught with problems as well. Maybe you could give some ideas here. How might a short-term mission trip, I'm talking about in-field experience here, be a benefit to a children's home or an orphanage? Any ideas?
Yeah. So I want to go back and preface that, hey, I know a lot of these children's homes, they get started by a national pastor who looks around the community and they say, how can I possibly preach the gospel and ignore the poverty and the condition that children live in? And so they go, I don't know what to do, but I can get access to a building and we can have kids come and stay here and we can get them this. So listen, my heart is not to say that there are bad people. Now, I mean, that aside, there are some bad people who are taking advantage, and this is, what they do. But by and large, the Christian ministries who are doing this, they're just doing the best they can to help children, and they have no idea about research or child development. They're just doing what they can. So say that, put that there. But often what we do with our short-term trips is we come and we hold babies. I'm going to come and love on a child. But for you to walk in to a child's life for 1 week, replace their long-term caregiver, and then walk away, it has consequences that we don't see, we're not aware of, that undermine. So I know that's not your question. I'm getting there. But there are things we do that support these children's homes that just feed into it that aren't healthy. So what are some other things you can do? Well, big picture, this is what I would love to do, and this is what Faith to Action does, is they'll work with your partner. Again, you don't go cold turkey and change what you're doing. They'll work with your partner to help them go, how do we go from the centralized institutionalized care to family-based care across a continuum, a spectrum? And eventually they have stories of these we used to do institutional care for 100 kids, 150 kids. We've now found a way to get them into homes, either their own parents, other family members, or perhaps even like foster homes. And now they funnel those resources into community-wide projects that address thousands of children. Okay. Okay, so what are some things? Things you can do to come in and train and support the everyday caregivers, providing respite, not in terms of you taking care of the children, but what can you do to come in and encourage and provide respite and refreshment to them, training that they might use, knowledge that they might use, like that. That's some of the main stuff is working with the staff who are providing that childcare. So if you go to actually on our website, if you go to resources and free downloads, there's we do have a resource there you can download that helps you evaluate with you and your partner. But if you go to faithtooaction.org, they also have kind of a best practices on short-term missions and with orphan and vulnerable children. And that also will give you some more ideas and explanations. So it's a controversial topic. I mean, anytime we say, but we have to have these, we can't shy away from the hard conversations.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
Tory, let me give a plug here. For one, SOE, we love SOE. We love the thoughtfulness and just the intentionality of these practices that you guys have put together, really helping short-term become a part of a larger missions vision. So that's number one. Number two, Food for the Hungry has a program called C2C, Church to Community. And when they do child sponsorship, these are not orphan kids either. They're just vulnerable kids in communities. But your church engages with a specific community for a long period of time. And it's an entire process that they go through, and they want to shape worldview and things like that. Because what happens when you have that type of a model, relationship is introduced. You're not just popping in, popping out. You're a church that gets to know this community for 8, 9, 10 years. Yeah. And so then the short-term trips become much more effective, much deeper. So I just want to mention that if you're going to work with, children's homes and orphanages, don't pop around the world. Find one to consistently plug into. That's kind of what I want to mention there.
Yeah. Yep.
Hey, David, any questions we want to surface here?
Yeah. And I'll add, I think that we've touched on it, but I know that there was a season where, my missions resume was mostly short-term trips. And anytime things began to press against that, it can feel awkward and uncomfortable. But I think just having an open mind, we do some things well, we need to do other things better. And so keep that open mind as you're hearing some of these things. I think that's just really important. It's hard if your church has been doing missions a certain way for 5 years or 10, 20, 30 years, it's really hard to steer the ship. But some of those things, just really need to be looked at. But kind of switching gears, how can we navigate team travel well in light of COVID-19 guidelines and requirements changing often? I know you touched on that a little bit, and we posted that link in there in the chat.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you have, well, communication is going to be a real key. So you really do want to make sure that when people are signing, whether, the person themselves, or if it's a youth trip working with their parents, to help them really understand what they're signing up for, what are some of the possibilities that could happen with quarantine and things like that. Helping understand what are they going to have access to be able to do, especially if it's what happens if that youth person contracts, test positive, is that parent going to be able to travel and go down and spend, stay with them, or do you have a leader who's going to stay? So some of those things, just being ahead of communication, making sure you're aware of any travel restrictions with the country before you take off. Including things like what testing requirements there might be for entrance into the country, as well as testing requirements for back into the United States after having been in that country. Often there are tests and their results within 72 hours of your arrival. So what that means is that you're departing Spain, headed, I don't know, whatever country, headed for LA. At the point you land in LA, that test cannot be any more than 72 hours ago, and you have to have that negative result. So if you missed a flight and you had a missed connection and they had to rebook you the next day, and now you're outside of the 72 hours, talk to your travel agent. Don't just book on Travelocity. Talk to your travel agent, make sure they'll help you through that process, your insurance agent. So know about some of those things. The big thing that you want to talk about is the hot topic, vaccinations. So, your church, your organization, whoever you are, I guarantee you there's been talks about, do we require people to travel to be vaccinated or not? That's a part of it. You and your ministry are going to have to prayerfully decide that, and that is a part of team travel in a responsible way, not only amongst the team members and what that dynamic might be if some are vaccinated and some aren't, but also what does that mean for the community you're going into. So those are a few of the things. Again, rapidly changing restrictions. It also means make sure you're not planning a trip so quickly because of a change in restriction that you don't really have time to properly prepare for it. So keep that in mind. That's a few things off the top of my head. So.
Yeah, that's good. So here's kind of I feel like this is a really practical question, but say there's a church missions leader, whatever, that's thinking, okay, maybe we do need to reevaluate our whole short-term mission strategy. What's the first step? Steering a ship is hard. And so what would you recommend as a first step to say, hey, we really want to take a hard, honest look at our short-term missions program?
Yeah. Okay. So, gosh, I feel like this is going to be like a shameless self-promotion, but the first thing I would do is get into one of our standards introductory workshops. So we do them as pre-conferences at the Missio Nexus Mission Leaders Conference. We're going to do one as a pre-conference at the International Conference on Missions. So if you really want them like in person, you can do them there. We've moved them online. You can go to our website and register for one. I think the next online one is in October. But they're as cheap as $112 a person if you're a member, to $175 if you're attending in person, $150 online if you're not a member. We can do some, if you go, man, I've got 10 people we'd want to take through it, we could take you through it. You're just your group online or in person. There's advantages to having it just be your group, advantages to have, getting to know other organizations. But anyway, the reason why I say that is because it's going to walk you back to the beginning and help you think about, in particular, your purpose, your calling, and then think about your partnerships, even on a bigger level than just the short-term trip. So at the beginning, I said something about if short-term missions is like your catalyst to get people into a mission ministry, you're upside down. it's going to help you pull back to that. We're not the experts to help you develop all around mission ministry church. That's 1615, but we're going to help you think about what that short-term mission strategy will fit into that partnership. So it's going to give you the big picture, and then you can really start to focus in on, okay, where's my first step that I need to fix? Where's my second step? Where's my third step? And then it just all takes off from there. And you're connected with others in the community who either have resources or experience, or you connect with us, and you go from there. So I think that was your question. I don't know. I talked for so long, I don't remember. So I think it was first steps. First step is come and take this workshop, because it's really good. And it's really one of the best things we do.
Tory, let me just flex your muscles for you, if I can do that. And I mean that, we're neutral partners. That's one of the values of 1615 is we represent many different agencies. Yeah. And we connect churches to those that have a good value proposition and they have a high view of local churches. And again, when it comes to short-term missions, how you prepare for them, how you plan them, what's your larger purpose, really SOE is the place to be. Someone asked about best practices. Folks, that's what Standards of Excellence is all about. And there's a lot of negative criticism of short-term missions. They've earned a bad rap, and rightly so in many cases. Yet when they're done well and they're done properly, I believe it can be a benefit to the kingdom. I mean, my life trajectory was personally just totally changed because of a well-done short-term mission trip. And it discipled me into a worldview. So yeah, let me just put a plug out there, folks. If you're rebooting right now and you're trying to think about how to do these biblically, strategically, pop into one of those workshops. Yeah. You'll be blessed.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So how about this one? Oh, go ahead, David.
No,
you wrap up. This is a real practical question, right? In light of COVID, the trip might get canceled. No, that was true pre-COVID as well, okay? But how do you navigate that when you're helping people raise money, train them for the trip, and you hold in tension the fact that, wow, this thing could get canned? I mean,
yeah,
that's a great question.
So I'm not a financial expert. ECFA, if you're not an ECFA member, again, like you're talking about neutral partnerships, that's just, I don't have any partnership with the ECFA. We're members as an organization, but they've been a good resource for us. They're a good resource to get good, solid advice. But so yeah, some of the things we've seen members do is they have adjusted their timeline of when they collect money. So they're not collecting it as early, so that minimizes the amount of perhaps refunds or issues there that they have to deal with. Some things that also would be as fundraising goes, collecting pledges instead of collecting the dollars. That way, when you get to that point to pull the trigger, you've got the money pledged. You don't have the money in, but you already know. So all you have to do is let that person know it's time to give, and you got the gift coming in. But some things to know, again, communicate ahead of time with people about cancellation policies and what happens with, a lot of this is around donations. Listen, refunding donations can be tricky. So don't just expect to be able to get a refund if you're donating, or to donate refunds to refund donations. That can be tricky. Talk to ECFA. But some of the things that you can do if a trip gets canceled that I think are well within best practices and legitimate is you can hold those funds for that person for a future trip. You could even transfer those funds to another ministry if that person is going to, let's say, instead of going on the trip with their church at college and they want to go with their college, their university is planning a trip. That to me, that would be relevant. Perhaps you use it to send a different person the next time around. Perhaps you use it for the benefit of the ministry you would have visited. Because again, so there's legal guidelines, of course, we have to follow. But I think there's also the idea of we want to honor the spirit of the gift and of the giver. So I think ultimately what a lot of people are doing is they're giving to make it possible for that person to engage in mission or to benefit the mission that they're going to go and work with. So I think what I've given is some ways that you can use that donation that you cannot refund, and perhaps to honor the gift and the giver uh, by making it possible for the person to serve or for ministry to happen in that location. So that's a good point. So cancellations, at what point do you, get money back? If, communicate ahead of time. Look, if we get 2 weeks away from the trip and me as a parent say, I don't want my kid to go, do I get my money back? Maybe I paid for it. It wasn't a donation. Do I get my money back even though the team is still going and the church says it's safe? You're just kind of overreacting. So just kind of, communicate, know, what those policies are going to be, who has the right to cancel. Of course, you should have the right to pull your kid or to say at any time, I don't feel safe going. But, what does that mean for donations or refunds of payments? And of course, some money's already been spent. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, that is really helpful. Thank you, Tory. So I want to finish. You had a couple more. You had 2 resources that you wanted to share here at the end. Wanted to make sure you got a chance. Do you just want to share those before we wrap up?
Yeah, you can go. Yeah, you can go to the website and click on resources, and there's articles and podcasts and documents. It's searchable. Also, after you click on resources, over on the side, there's a button for free downloads, and you can download a variety of documents, trip evaluations, host evaluations, your own evaluation. There's all sorts of stuff there, and we're constantly updating it and adding to it. So hopefully that's a benefit to you.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks again so much. Thanks for coming, everybody. We'll have this up in about a week. We'll have this both on our website as well as on our YouTube channel. Make sure to follow us on social media. If you want to keep up with events that we've got coming on, that is the best way to find out about webinars, podcasts, and workshops that we have going on. And definitely make sure you check out SOE. Tory, what a pleasure. Got a lot of thank yous and great contents in the comments. And so really appreciate you guys and what you do and coming on with us today and sharing.
All right. Well, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, everybody have a great day. We'll see you next time.
God bless. Bye-bye.